Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Manitoba Agriculture Crop Talk webinar. If you have any questions today during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A icon at the bottom of the toolbar, and we'll answer them at the end of each presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. I'd like to welcome everybody to the September 20th edition of Crop Talk. And September the 20th, the month is going by fast. And I guess with that, we also see a lot of crop being taken off. We've had a couple decent weeks. There's been some showers here and there, but it doesn't take long to get some of the crop off, and it's coming off fast. So that's good to see. With that, we're going to be starting to look at next year's crop already, and I've been talking to quite a few producers that are already buying seed and getting seed in place for next year, making plans, whether it's going to be growing a new variety or picking out a new variety. So that's starting to happen already too. So with that, I thought it would be a good idea today to talk about some more options for fall weed control. And we have an opportunity today to get Alan Christensen on. And Alan works for Gowan Canada. He's the Manitoba sales rep. And I think he does a lot of work with some of the products that maybe we used to use a lot of, and they've kind of were put on the shelf, but they're coming back. And I think they're coming back quite hot right now, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity for him to maybe go through some of the products that they have and some of the uses and how we could use them in our weed management strategies. So I guess with that, Alan, if you would like to grab the screen and start your presentation, we'll go from there.
Well, thank you very much for the invite. Just loading up there. Is my presentation in the right display mode?
You bet. You look great.
Great. Well, thanks again for the invite. I appreciate having the opportunity to visit with you today and participate in this webinar. So yeah, great segue. Just a good chance this fall. For the most part, it looks like it's going to be an early harvest outside of some corn and soybeans out there. Sunflowers, but yeah, we're gonna have a window this fall to get some work done to get a head start on 2024. Before I start, I just want to mention briefly that we, our demand for our products has gone up, and we'll talk about why that is here in a minute. But here at Gowan, we've seen that demand increasing and herbicide resistance not going away, and we've made some capital investments to secure better supply. So in case there's anybody on the webinar that might have been frustrated in the last couple falls that maybe not able to get the product that you were looking for, I don't see that being an issue this fall. We're in good supply of Avidex, Edge, and Fortress Microactive. So why are we talking about these products? And we're not the only ones talking about herbicide resistance. And Kim Brown Livingston's a great advocate for this province. Talking about and educating farmers about herbicide resistance across the prairies. We're just trying to make sure growers are aware of other tools they can use. And we don't have the solution or the only solution. There's lots of things you can do to try and manage herbicide resistance on your farm, but utilizing alternate modes of herbicide of action is one thing growers really need to look at. Even if they are older products, they've been around for a long time, but these are unique mode of actions that you can throw at your weed population. So a couple of key weeds I'm going to talk about today. The first one's wild oats, and you can see them waving at you above the canopy until the combine went through. Great idea if you do herbicide resistance testing on your farm. But if you haven't, we have a really good relationship with AgQuest and Minto that has a great facility for doing herbicide resistance testing. And they've shared, summaries, not individual grower results, obviously, but summaries of some of the testing they've done over the years. And I just updated this fall with everything they ran through the lab last year. And, you can see the herbicide resistance is not going away. So you look at your FOPs and your dens, especially on your group ones, 100% or near 100% average presence of resistance. So your DIMs, like your clethodim, resistance is a little bit lower, but quite often those products are tank mixed with something like Liberty. But clethodim resistance definitely out there. And then when you look at your group twos, they get all grouped or lumped into one because there is so many group twos. high levels of resistance. So why I like to show this, just if you haven't had time, or quite often if you're sampling something this fall, it's going to be next spring before you get the results back. Good chance it's going to come back with numbers you're not going to want to see, that you do have herbicide resistance in those wild oats. So what's this mean? Just, a quick example, growing wheat on a field next year, and you grab the crop production guide. What am I going to spray for my wild oats? And you can see there's so many options. And anybody involved with the crop production guide will know, this isn't a complete list. There's so many generics out there, so many different brands, that there is a lot of options for wild oat control. So great, lots of options. But what if you got group 1 resistance? So if you cross out everything, that is group 1 for those wild oats, the list gets shorter pretty quick. But what if I have group 1 and 2 wild oat resistance? You can see the list gets really short really fast. And that's where Avidex or Fortress come in. Group 15, Fortress has the group 3 component. That's a different mode of action that you can put on ahead for your wild oat control. And then I'm going to, just a plug, you can see at the bottom right, I have glyphosate and mentioned for pre-burn, but also Insight. So that's a new product we launched in spring of 23 that does have wild oats on the label. It's pre-emerge only. It doesn't have residual control, but just a way to clean up those wild oats that might be emerged before your crop gets out of the ground. So Insight's one to watch out for next year, as it is, group 14 is not a new mode of action, but it is a group 14 that has wild oats on the label, just for a different mode of action to throw with those wild oats. And then, kochia resistance, unfortunately, it's, not just group 2 resistance anymore. Some of you might have seen the survey, but in 2013, there was a base survey done of around 300 fields looking to see the status of glyphosate-resistant kochia in the province. And in 2018, they did the same kind of baseline study, sampling 300 fields, looking to see what the level of glyphosate resistance was. And in those 5 years, went from 1% to 59%. Just a line I pulled out of the document, group 2's had near complete assimilation over 2 decades. See glyphosate following the same path. So, 2018 was already 6 years ago. A lot of growers I talked to accept that their kochia is resistant to glyphosate. Probably by 2030, I'm going to say it's all going to be resistant to glyphosate. And it wasn't just soybeans and corn where you think it would be. They were finding it in ditches and small grains and canola, crops that weren't just sprayed with glyphosate that year. And then more recently, Alberta did a survey around, again, 300 fields in 2021. And then you can see 78% resistant to glyphosate, 44% resistant to fluroxypyr, and 28% resistant to dicamba. And that doesn't even mention, the percentages of those that were cross resistance that had 2 or 3 resistance to those modes of action. So, again, Extend, a great tool for Manitoba farmers to be able to use dicamba. But again, we can't just rely on it that it's going to save our bacon. We got to look at all the tools that are available. And this is just a quick map of where the samples were taken. The bigger the dot, the darker red it is, the higher level of glyphosate resistance they found. And you can see it's all across the south, moving north. I've been the rep since 2015. I remember in Shoal Lake, for example, kochia never came up in conversation. It comes up all the time now as you go up Highway 16. The products, or that weed unfortunately is moving farther north into more and more growing areas. So, just the take-home message is, sports analogy, I like to say, get all the players in the game. This is just the table from the back of the crop production guide, lays out the different modes of actions that are available to you for you to use on your farm. And just, really trying to challenge a grower, how much group 1, group 2, group 9 are we using on the farm already? Group 4s are in a lot of chemistries. Is there a chance to get a group 3? So that's ethafluralin is Edge, or trifluralin is Treflan into your rotation. Not every crop every year, but to expose that weed population to a different mode of action. And then, use your group 15s, which now Trilate falls into. That, again, not every crop every year, but expose that weed population to a different mode of action. So herbicide resistance is very important, and we need to take care, but we also need to make money. Is there some other good reasons to think about using a pre-seed residual product? So a couple other things I just like to point out is, with taking out the resistant weeds, we're also going to reduce selection pressure at the time of your in-crop spraying. your Edge, Avidex, or Fortress, never going to be 100%. I always tell, if I say 100%, kick me out of the office. We're trying to give you that base layer of control, hopefully achieve 80%. Sometimes it can be higher. I've seen results in the 90s, but it's never going to be 100%. But if we can get rid of that 80% of those weeds, target and non-target weeds, when you come over top with your in-crop herbicide, instead of trying to spray that mat of weeds on the left, you're going to get better coverage on the weeds on the right. And what I mean by non-target is, if you can take out 80% of the wild oats with Avidex, you're going to get better coverage on the volunteer canola and the buckwheat as well, right? Because you're not trying to spray through that mat of wild oats. So anytime you can remove a weed before it emerges, it's just going to take the pressure off your post-emerge. I joke, but I mean it. In canola, we make Liberty look good. In wheat, we make Infinity look good, just because it doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting. It just has to try and clean up the escapes. Yield potential. If we had more time, we've done some small plot work, just showing. This picture on the left, I grabbed one year driving down the road. I'd be ecstatic if I got that kind of kill on my wild oats. You can see all the brown dead carcasses down there. But my take-home message is how much damage was already done, how much potential was lost in that field because it was struggling to compete with all those wild oats. And if you look close, you can see plants missing. Those rows aren't going to be as full, and all those wild oats, even though you killed them, did some damage to your crop. Where you can see a picture on my right here, grower north of Rivers that ran out of Fortress and figured, I'll just leave a check strip for Allen. Took the picture and showed me the next year. So, the canola where the Fortress was, not having to compete, going to be able to stretch out, more moisture available, more nutrients available, where the canola on the left is having to compete with all those wild oats and knock the yield potential back. And then just the last thing is trying to get some flexibility into your system. From everybody I talk to, there isn't many farms out there getting smaller. Everyone's getting larger and just have more acres to cover at herbicide timing. And if you could farm on paper, it would be easy. You'd always be at the field exactly when you need to be, exactly when the weeds are in the stage. The wind would never blow, but that's not reality. Weather's going to get in the way, breakdowns are going to get in the way, and you're going to get to some fields late. So by doing 1% of your acres with a residual herbicide, at least if you get backed up spraying, focus on the acres that don't have the residual herbicide, because you'll have something working in the fields that do. Trying to keep that field clean so that if you do get there 5 days late and the weeds are a little out of stage, well, at least you'll get better coverage because there won't be as many of them, and you'll hopefully still have a clean field at the end of the year. So that's kind of the why. Now I'll get into the what and the where as we move into harvest. So I'm talking to growers or agronomists. I like to start with this slide just to let growers know that we're not a one crop product, and that if you do put a residual down this fall and markets change, you do have options. I still think a lot of growers out there think Avidex is just wheat, just a wheat herbicide, but there's a lot of barley out there too, and you only have group 1 options in barley. Or they think of Edge as just sunflowers and dry beans, which don't get me wrong, are very important crops to me, but the emergence of peas, resistance in canola, a few acres of some of these smaller crops out there, there is other options. So you do have other options when you apply a gallon herbicide this fall. And then really, whether any 3 of the products, the only recrop is you can't grow oats the following year. So if you put any of these products down this fall, this counts as the 2024 crop year. You wouldn't be able to grow oats in 2025, but you could go back to oats in 2026. And then, small seeded grasses, canary seed, some minor use crops in there that we have to watch out for with the group 3 component. But oats is the big one. If you use these products this fall, you can't grow oats in 2025. So what do I need to apply with? I like to include this slide as well, just as growers have seen the need that they need to do something different. They're trying to use equipment that they have on farm. So I get some, want to use spin spreaders, try and use their air seeder to get this product down. But we need good uniform coverage. These products don't move very far in the soil. So an air boom applicator is really the only way to apply. And there's some new ones coming on the market, but Salford/Valmar has a wide range of applicators that can put our products down. They have the harrow mounted kits, which are nice. You apply and incorporate all in one pass, and then floaters out there that have chem boxes. You can put your fertilizer and your Avidex Fortress or Edge down at the same time. Again, another shift I've seen in the industry. When I started, I was going to say half of the floaters at retail had chem boxes, and now I think every floater at retail has a chem box. There's some grower-owned floaters that don't have chem boxes on them, but again, just the need for our product. A lot of the retail partners are making that investment in application equipment so they can help out their growers. Where can I apply, I guess, is the next thing I want to get into. Again, some products haven't been around for a long time. They hear Avidex Fortress Edge. They think, oh, I don't want to go back to tillage, or I'm not going to till my fields. Farming practices have changed, and we've done the work, and we've shown that we can change with them, and our products work very well, in some of these scenarios. Anywhere from zero till to full till, we can find a way to incorporate our products in. Straw management is important, and just with a wide range of moisture conditions and straw load out there, it's something to watch out for. But fields have been harrowed post harvest. See a lot of harrows out in September on those warm afternoons breaking up straw. If fields have been baled, those fields are ready to go to apply as they sit. You don't need to do any extra tillage or harrowing before you apply. If you do fertilizer work, that's going to, band anhydrous, band fertilizer this fall, that's going to help break up the straw too. And those fields are ready to apply as they sit. But, there is some really tall crops out there, and there is some straw. If you have really thick, heavy straw, I need that particle to be able to get through the straw and get to the soil. One, line I'll use a million times is I need particle to soil contact. And if you got really heavy, thick straw, it's going to be hard to get that product down, or it's going to be hard to harrow it post application without getting some hang up in the harrows or getting uneven coverage. So, maybe not the whole field, but some of these big canola crops, you might have to go harrow some headlands, harrow some low spots, just spread that straw, break that straw up a bit before you apply, and then put our product on once you manage with that. And if you do some fertilizer work and get some really heavy clods, we're not gonna get uniform coverage. We're not gonna penetrate that clod. Need to smash those up, or in some cases, maybe that's a field we leave till spring and let those clods mellow out over the winter time. And just a couple other watch outs. Not seeing much burning this year, but if you do stubble burn, please don't use our products this fall. The charcoal left over from the burning will really tie up the active ingredient, and it'll take a long time to come off that charcoal, and you're going to have reduced performance next year. And then manure, if you put manure on even this past spring, I wouldn't recommend using our products, but if you're doing any manure work this fall, not a good home for Avidex Fortress or Edge. The organic matter in that manure is going to tie up our active and lead to reduced control. So just a quick summary of the products. So Avidex, mentioned unique, trilate, group 15 mode of action. Avidex is just a wild oat herbicide. We use it for control of some different weeds in different parts of the world, but for Manitoba growers listening today, we're just looking at wild oats. Application timing, October 1st, especially post Thanksgiving, when soils are starting to cool off, we can get applying that product. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Doesn't take a lot of moisture for these products to activate. My line is, if there's enough moisture next spring for your product to activate, or for your crop to germinate, the product's going to activate. By putting it on this fall, we can take advantage of snowfall and some spring rains, and it's going to make it work a little bit sharper. But by putting it on this fall, at least if it's dry next spring and you don't want to touch your fields and you want to conserve every bit of moisture you got, at least that product's already on the field. Because we don't need a magical half-inch all in one shot to activate the product in the spring. By getting it on this fall, it's going to activate and be there for you next spring. And then incorporation, you don't have to till these fields twice. Just looking for a harrow pass to get it through the straw and get it worked into that top half or 1 inch of soil. And the step up from Avidex is Fortress. So Fortress has full rate triolate, but also has 4% trifluralin or Treflan on the same carrier. So this does a couple things. This brings 2 mode of actions to the wild oats. So now you get shoot uptake from the Avidex portion, but also some root uptake from the trifluralin portion, and gives you green and yellow foxtail controls on the label, and then some general broadleaf suppression. Again, this isn't your broadleaf control. This is to take the pressure off your broadleaf herbicide. So, instead of that Liberty Pass having to kill a sea of lamb's quarters, it only has to get the lamb's quarters that escape the Fortress. Whether you're using Avidex or Fortress, still trying to make just that nice shallow treated layer on the top of the soil. No difference there. So I touched on temperature quick, but for our products to activate, they need prolonged soil temps above 5 degrees Celsius for them to activate. So that's why, October 1st, but especially post-Thanksgiving, soils are cooling off rapidly. If they're still above 5 degrees, they're not going to activate very much, but soils are cooling off so fast that the product's just going to sit there and be dormant. A warm afternoon on October 25th is not going to activate your Avidex Fortress or Edge. You don't need to worry about it. Those soils stay cool. The days are short. So by getting the product on this fall, you got that job done, and you're not going to experience any losses. The product will be there for you next spring. Then the second nice part about doing this fall is while you're waiting to get on your field, while you're waiting for it to dry up, that field's warming up and that product's activating. So hopefully by the time you get there to seed your crop, the product's activated and it's killing weeds for you. If I'm making plans with a grower, I say, if you can't do everything this fall, do your early seeded crops for sure this fall. So definitely, get your edge down in front of your peas this fall, get your Avidex down in front of your barley this fall. Whatever crop you think you're going to seed first, make sure you get that product down this fall. And if you want to do some edge in front of your canola, you're probably not seeding your canola till later in the spring. You got time to do that next spring if needed. And then just one more reminder, you put the product down, it activates next spring, but unfortunately, weeds start to germinate around that same activation temperature. So by putting down products this fall, I don't want you to think that you're not going to have to burn off next spring. I don't know what next spring is going to bring, but you could have some weeds that escape. Don't panic. Burn them off with a non-selective before your crop emerges, and then you'll get the 6 to 8 weeks of residual control after that. I get a few calls every spring. Hey, I put edge down. I got weeds in my field. Well, have you seeded yet? No. Well, take care of your weeds. Do that burn off, seed your crop. I'll come and have a look at with you in a couple weeks. And, say 19 times out of 20, we take care of those early escapes and away we go, and things are really clean after that. So just by putting a herbicide down this fall does not replace a burn down next spring. I mentioned dry. This is a plot we had down in Melita a few years back. Fall applied edge, and it never really saw any considerable moisture until the 3rd week of June. And you can see the broadleaf control was the same, but just the difference in the wild oat control, edge versus no edge. And this did have an in-crop herbicide, but just the Viper was up against it with that sea of wild oats. And even on the edge side, you can see a few wild oats in there. That's a planter miss. It got wide on the planter passes, so there wasn't much competition there. So a few more wild oats came through. But by putting it down this fall, you're not as reliant on spring moisture for this product as maybe some of the other residual products on the market. And then incorporation, I touched on the managing the fields. The straw load's good. One harrow pass is enough. All I want to do is get that product down to the soil, get it moved into the top layer of the soil. It doesn't take a lot of incorporation. But if there is fields out there with heavier straw loads, they will benefit from a second pass. Preferably one this fall and then the second one next spring, just to make things more uniform and warm the soil up a bit. And also the other thing that does that second, those incorporations, any weeds that shelled out in front of the header or blew out the back of the combine, you're going to get them into the dirt so we can actually kill them. I've seen in some rare scenarios where weed seeds actually germinate in the chaff if they keep getting spoon-fed moisture, and they actually germinate and grow above our product. They're growing above the soil, so we can't control them. So just that harrow pass gets some weed seeds into the soil so we get a little sharper and more consistent control on them. And then, just drive home that point, that harrow pass, the biggest thing to do is get that soil to particle contact. If it's hung up on chaff or straw, it's not going to do you any good. It's got to touch the soil for it to work. So that first pass, making sure we get that product to the soil. If you want to do another pass, that second pass redistributes things, makes things a little bit more uniform, probably ups the control 5 or 10%, but not as essential as that first pass, just to make sure we get that good soil to particle contact. And then how Avadex and Fortress work, what we're trying to do is, I mentioned that 1/2 to 1 inch treated layer on the top of the surface. We're trying to get that uniform treated layer. If you have wild oats in that treated layer, they die right away. But if wild oats germinate below the treated layer, the coleoptile node moves up into the treated layer, contacts the triolate, and stops growth right there. And I'll show you a picture in a minute what that looks like. I might hide that slide actually, but it stops growth right there. And they never break surface. They never steal moisture, nutrients from your crop. So that's how or triolate works on the wild oats. Wheat, the coleoptile node actually stays at the kernel, so it'll push that first shoot through unaffected. So the take-home message on that is, keeping that layer shallow, but if you're planting wheat or barley next spring, just a reminder, we want to put it below the treated layer so it grows through unaffected. If you're growing canola, flax, peas, mustard, you can plant at any depth. There's no crop sensitivity issues at all. So if you want to use Fortress and you like to plant your canola really shallow, you don't need to worry about being below the treated layer. It's just wheat and barley. We want that product below the treated layer. So that's my message on Avadex and Fortress. I'm just going to shift gears and finish talking about Edge. Again, just drive home the crops that were labeled on, but basically any broadleaf crop that you're growing on your farm could be a candidate for Edge. One new thing that we're not going to have in time for this fall, but likely next fall, is we will have a minor use label for, or assuming we get approved, a minor use label for fall application ahead of flax. We've done 2 years of trials and no concerns, so we're making the submission this fall. Hopefully it'll be in time for fall 2024. Then basically all the broadleaf crops will be on the labels. So, and for rates, you can see I have the fall rate table up there, but it's, for the bulk of Manitoba, it's 12.5 pounds. 80 acres of mini bulk we're going to put down this fall. There might be some really light sand that we can do 10 pounds on, but more importantly, I like to talk to growers about what crop are you growing more than this table. If you're growing Clearfield sunflowers or Clearfield canola, you want to keep that rate up and get the best control you can. If you're maybe been edged down in front of Liberty canola and you're still confident in Liberty, if you got lower organic matter, you could get away with 10 pounds. But if you got a crop that has some herbicide challenges due to resistance, keep that rate up and get as much control out of the edge as we can. So I like to segue, I started talking about kochia, and it, when my phone rings, it's usually the one that starts the conversation. No doubt about it. And I think anybody on their travels has seen the kochia out in some of the fields this year. But with that, I just, like to take a moment to remind growers that, besides kochia, there is a lot of other good reasons to use Edge. You're going to get more value out of it than just the kochia control. So wild oat control, labeled for suppression, but I'm going to touch on that in a minute. When in zero till, I've seen really good control on wild oats. Conventional till, the wild oat control is just maybe not as quite as consistent, but again, at least it's an alternate mode of action on wild oats. It's exposing your wild oat population to a group 3 mode of action. Buckwheat's a hard weed to control, confirmed group 2 resistance in Alberta. So if we can, that buckwheat gets big, it's hard to control. Why not kill it below the ground? Cleavers can be a big issue in canola, some of the northern parts of Manitoba. So nice to get ahead of it. Pigweed, a big issue in eastern Manitoba, so trying to get ahead of it and knock back that seed population as much as possible. Foxtail control. So definitely confirm group 1 and 2 resistant green and yellow foxtail. And in pockets, actually, back when there was a lot more of Treflan and Edge used, there is some pockets that have been confirmed group 3 resistant. And I still have a few, dry bean growers that are up against that. Back, some of those western areas, I've had growers come back and using Edge. and not getting 100% control. They never will, but getting satisfactory control, that the percent of that group 3 resistant population has decreased over the years, but it is still there in the background in a few areas. Lamb's quarters, tough weed to control in canola, just some other weeds that, are on label that, depending on what area you're from, could be an issue that we can help control. Grower sent me this picture this spring or last spring, but has Valmar and had some edge left over, and thought, oh, there's some kochia grower blowing in from the neighbors on the left side there. I better take action and do a pass around the headlands just to try and keep it at bay. And he sent me this picture was saying, why didn't I do 4 or 5 passes? You can see how big the kochia is and what he's up against. So just an example of what edge could do to help control kochia in some different crops. And then, this is where edge differs a bit. We're Avidex or Fortress, we're always just putting it on the surface, always just putting it shallow. But for edge to kill a weed, the weed actually needs to germinate in the treated layer. So we need root and shoot uptake of that weed for it to be lethal on it. So for conventional till, and this is, mainly growers in the east, growers I work with in Altona, Winkler, Carmen, that are, Portage, they're doing conventional tillage. For them to use edge, they need to incorporate it to their normal working depth as uniformly as possible. So what this means is, getting your edge on, quite often it's this fall, and, doing a normal tillage pass. So cultivation, disc, vertical till pass, working it into your normal working depth to get it started into the soil. And then next spring when it activates, or later this fall, I have 3 days up there. I'm going to say 5 or 7 days later, just because it's cooler in the fall. Working it on the opposite angle, slightly shallower, just to get it as uniform as possible, so it's not strippy in between the shanks or in between the coulters. So it's going to take 2 passes to get this product uniformly mixed in. I've seen examples where it gets dry and guys try and save a pass, and quite often it comes back to bite them. It's strippy, it's inconsistent. You need that second pass to get things very uniform into the soil. However, if you grab the edge label, we do have a new, that is, growers have moved away from Manitoba, but all over. As they moved away from tillage, now they're not stirring their soil profile as much, that over time, the weed seed bank really becomes concentrated on the surface. You haven't mixed those weeds down 3 inches, that everything that shells out or blows out the back of the combine stays really close to the surface. So really you can use that just like Avidex or Fortress. You can blow it on and give it a good vigorous arrow, and that's going to be enough to work that edge into that top inch of soil where it needs to be and get really good control. I say it can actually work better the longer the field's been in minimum tillage. 1, because more of those weed seeds are concentrated at the surface, but 2, now you're taking that 12.5 pounds and keeping it very concentrated on the top instead of diluting it through 2 or 3 inches of dirt. So we can get really good control in some of those scenarios. And I did leave the picture in, just an example, this is wild oat control in Avidex, but my take home message is, please, if you have concerns that your product's not working, give me a call in June and let's go see if we can find some activity or find out what it is or isn't doing. This is what we call a scrape back, where we remove the top of the soil and expose the dead weeds underneath. And that is, for newer growers that are, used to spraying post-emerge herbicides only, and spraying something and coming back a week later and seeing if it's dead or not. This is a new concept because we're killing them below the surface. So yeah, we got to get out, remove the top of the soil. You can see a couple of wild oats in my spade there, just showing where there was a few escapes, but showing all the dead wild oats around it to show how well it was working. So please call me in June. Call me when you're in the combine, in the swather. Not much I can say. I don't know what it did or didn't do. Please give me a call and let's have a look at things. So you can go to gallonco.com and my contact information, if you're in Manitoba, automatically pops up. So that's what I had this morning. We still do some small plot work all over all over Western Canada. Just example of what Fortress and Edge can do to your wild oat control, really helping keep things clean. So I appreciate the time, and if anyone has any questions, I'd take them now.
Okay, sure, Alan. There has been some questions come in. One question, if you use liquid edge in the spring of 2023 on sunflowers, can you plant oats in 2024?
No, you cannot. And it's not like you wouldn't get a crop. There will definitely be enough carryover, and especially this year, guessing it's in a drier area, that there would be enough carryover that I don't know if it'll be 5, 10, 20%, but you would have some losses in those oats.
Okay, and same question, if you use edge granular in the fall of 2022 and grow oats in the spring of 2024.
So yeah, that fall application of edge would count as a 2023 application, and by label you can't grow oats the following year, so no oats in 2024. You would have to wait till 2025. You know, if I will have those conversations, or I'll entertain them one-on-one and evaluate risk. So amount of moisture, what's your organic matter, but as a general rule of thumb, it's on label. I don't want to see oats the following year.
Okay, yeah. So if somebody's got some specific questions regarding that, they could just give you a call then, right? Or talk to you. Okay.
You betcha.
Next question. What about an application or using Edge 2 years in a row?
For sure. And just with some of the resistance we're seeing, again, that question probably more often all the time. So there's no concerns on stacking or anything that are going to hurt the second crop. Like you will have a little bit of carryover from year 1 into year 2, and then you put more edge on year 2. I'm not worried about the stacking. I just tell growers, if you're up against it, like really up against herbicide resistance, or you got a new piece of land and you're trying to get it cleaned up, go ahead and do it. But this is not a good long-term strategy. I don't want to talk about herbicide resistance and overuse of different modes of action, and then encourage you to overuse my modes of action. We don't want to create group 3 resistant kochia, for example. So, do it once, but then give it 3-4 years off. Don't go back to edge for that field for a few years. Use some different modes of action in that field, and give the group 3 a year or a few years off.
Okay. Edge in saline areas.
So, definitely works. I just want to, it's about setting expectations, I guess. And I've run into this a few years, especially on dry years. Yeah, you can use edge in your saline area. It's going to work, but we're not season long control. We're 6 to 8 weeks of residual control. So we'll keep that field or that area clean for a while. But if there's no crop competition, and a good competitive crop is one of your best herbicides, if there's no crop competition, guess what? That kochia is going to come. Probably 1st of July, it's going to start to germinate when that edge has run its course. So I can't magically take saline areas and make them productive. We can keep the kochia back, and hopefully your crop gets established and chokes out anything that comes later. But it's not going to be season long control. What I like to say to growers is, we're trying to, the combine is the great seed spreader, right? That saline area that's not competitive or not very productive. Let's keep it small, but use edge in the field and the areas around that field to keep that area small, and try and prevent the kochia from spreading to the more productive areas, the areas around that saline spot. So, you're going to get the value out of the edge in that saline spot, but keeping that spot small and keeping that kochia patch smaller by using edge is the bigger value in my eyes.
Okay, and another question that had come in when you were talking was regarding flax. So I think you mentioned that you're working on that registration.
So yeah, we've done 2 years of trials. We've submitted the data, but we don't officially have a label for it in time for this fall. All indications are we should have the label for fall application of edge in front of flax for next fall. But if you did it this fall, it would be technically off label.
Okay, so another one where producers should just call you regarding that, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Um,
let's talk through the scenario. I will, like, we can't advertise it, but I will say I will support it. I've seen the trials with my own eyes. I've seen the summary of data. There is no phytotoxicity there on a fall application of edge. If you're really low organic matters, might play with the rates a bit, but very supportive of using edge. And it'll be nice when we have the label and we can really advertise and make sure all flax growers are aware that it's an option. But I'll plug Fortress at this point. Fortress is a labeled option, and if you got Group 1 wild oats, I'm going to encourage you to use Fortress over Edge anyways. Fortress is going to be just that little bit more consistent on wild oats, and you're also going to get some broadleaf control and take the pressure off the bucktail or the curtail lamb or whatever your broadleaf herbicide is. But if you're looking at flax and say kochia or the broadleafs or the driver, that's where we can start having that edge conversation.
okay, and one other question, I think you talked about this, was about the trash and heavy trash this fall. Recommendations on getting the product on.
So yeah, like having trouble. Just I'm seeing some, from Highway 16 is one thing down to, I try to cover most of the province. So up Highway 16 is one thing. Where down south, there isn't as much straw. I'm not as worried about trash, but yeah, those canola crops that when you desiccated and they were touching the bottom of the sprayer, they're going to need something done to them likely before you apply our product. Hopefully you get the combine through on a good warm day and the chopper blades do a really good job. But if you got really thick canola straw, please harrow it before you apply. If the harrows are going to fill up with straw and debris, I'd rather you do that first. Make that little pile on the edge of the field and get rid of it, and then put our products on, and then you can do a nice uniform harrow without the harrows filling up, and move that trash, move that dirt around, and get that good uniform soil to particle contact I'm looking for. So again, reach out to me, a lot of experienced retails out there, reach out to them if you have any concerns about field conditions and talking it through if you need to do something ahead of application. But if wheat stubble that was heavy harrowed post harvest, to me that's ready to go. You've already managed your straw. Time to get your product on, and then give it another harrow in October, and you're all good to go for next spring.
Okay. Yeah, and I was just going to comment there. Yeah, I've been in some canola that's been harvested as probably 2.5 feet of straw or stubble left in some of those fields. So it's there's lots to deal with right now.
Yeah,
The last question that came in, and this was, I guess, regarding the Valmars. Do you have, or is there the ability to get the calibration charts?
absolutely. Salford/Valmar actually produced new charts based on bulk density a couple years back. I could send those to you, Lionel, and then you'd have them available if any growers are asking. But I should have included my cell number is if anybody's got a pen, 204-390-2340. Give me a call or a text, and I can shoot you over the right chart for that Valmar.
Okay, I think I've got your number. You said 2340, right?
Yeah, 204-390-2340. But I'll send the charts to you too, Lionel, so you have them
Perfect.
available
What
if you
I'll
have
do,
growers looking.
yeah, and what I can do is I can get Lori to include it and when she sends out the recorded message here, or recorded webinar.
Okay.
Good. Oh, and one just came in here. I guess it's about water hemp, I guess. Any control or action on water hemp?
Great question. I know Joe Eichley in Fargo did some work a few years back that did show some Group 3 control. Now that's their work in Fargo, not Manitoba. But kind of one that we're watching and we're trying to learn about too. I just haven't had a lot of thankfully not yet, but I'm guessing it's coming, that I haven't seen it with my own eyes in Manitoba yet. But if I don't know if I could send you that presentation too. It's say it's not my presentation. I just was able to get a copy of it, but there was some work done at NDSU showing some control with Group 3s on water hemp.
Okay, good. That'd be great. You could, I bet Kim would like to see that as well if she hasn't
Yeah,
already.
I'll send that one to Kim, and then if she gets the question, it's just a resource, or maybe her and I should talk with Joe over the winter sometime too, and see if he's done any updated work. But
Great, great. Okay, well, that's a real good presentation, Alan. Thanks again for coming on and updating us on some of our fall weed control options here. I think it's something where producers used in the past, and it's nice to get that refresher just so we know what to expect for this coming fall and for the spring. So thanks again. Okay,
appreciate the invite.
oh, no problem. Yeah. With that, we're going to go to the crop scouting panel, and a couple of things. Question from last week that came in was any comments on the edible bean and the soybean crop? How's it looking this year? What's it looking like? And I got Dennis Lang to maybe address that one. So Dennis.
Okay, we're gonna get going here and present my screen here. Just give me a second here to go full screen. And then we're gonna go like this. Let's give it a minute to load up here, and then we should be on our way. So there we go. And Lionel, can you see my full screen now?
You bet, Dennis. Good looks good.
Okay, perfect. Good. So we're gonna get going here. And so I'm going to start off with Manitoba soybeans, I guess. First of all, I'll give you a quick overview of what's happening. So here's a chart here that takes into account where yields have been over the years. So if you look at 2022 acres, we took a bit of a drop last year. We were under 1 million acres last year, just based on a few different factors, I guess. A lot of it was growers deciding to maybe hold off on planting soybeans because it was getting to be a later year. But with that being said, we actually broke a record last year. Provincially, we're at 45 bushels an acre. Moving into 2023, our acres jumped back up again. So we're sitting at just about 1.5 million acres this year. And when you look at the average yields, looking back for 5 and 10 years, for 5-year average, we're looking at 35 bushels an acre. And for 10-year average, we're looking at 36. So my yield projection, and I like to kind of do this at this time of the year for 2023 right now. Earlier on, I was saying probably somewhere in that 32 to 34. I think we're going to be in that 34 range just based on what I'm seeing lately here. So some of the factors that kind of came into play this year, talked about the increase from 2022. A lot of that was, stronger prices and also recovery of the acres, because growers decided to kind of take a break, I guess, from soybeans last year just because of the season being a little bit later. So this year, the lack of moisture in some regions, especially in that July and August period, you really saw a yield drop in those early harvested beans. So anything harvested towards the end of August and early September, those yields were coming in from 20 to 30 bushels an acre, and there were some under 20 as well. But that's kind of expected based on the fact that the beans just didn't have moisture and they just prematurely finished off. But what we are seeing now is areas that had better rainfall through July. We're starting to see 30 to 40 bushel yields pretty consistently now, and with some nice surprises as well. In areas that did receive some good moisture, and again, it's variable across the province, but where they did receive good moisture, we're looking at 50 to 60 bushels being reported, not averages, but just being reported. Right now, harvest progress provincially stands at about 21%. And with the central region being furthest ahead at 45% complete on soybeans. And so some of the harvest issues that we're seeing so far, because of the kind of conditions that we're seeing, we didn't see any significant rainfall here once soybean harvest has started. So you can see in this sample here, we're seeing some green immature seeds. Those typically will kind of dry down. And once you harvest in the bin, you don't want to have too many. But right now, seed moistures are kind of in that 12% range with these immature seeds in there. Growers are harvesting those and taking them off and putting them into the bin. A few immature seeds will change in the bin. I put on here allowable crush for soybeans at 2%. And actually, I just got a note here from the elevator. It's actually 3%. But again, use your judgment when you're out there. If you're seeing a lot of green pods come in, you may want to wait for a couple of days. You don't want to smear the sample. Again, for commercial grade or crushed beans, it's not as critical to have a nice looking bean. But again, sometimes there might be some losses there if you're in there a little bit too early. But what will happen when you have this kind of condition, when you have dry seed and green seed mixed in there, what will make things a little bit better is if you actually get a rain in there, like a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch rain on those plants. Then when the beans start to dry down, they dry down more evenly. And a lot of times those green ones disappear in the field. And moving forward here, some of the issues that I've been dealing with here just lately here, soybean maturity. And now most times we don't really worry too much about doing any kind of pre-harvest work on soybeans unless there's been some major weed issues in the field. But I've had a few questions from some of the food grade people right now because some people getting a little anxious about getting in. It is only, it still is mid-September yet, so we're still okay yet. And there's been no frost issues on the soybean crop that could cause any issues. But when you look at these two pictures here, I went on Saturday, looked at the field. So the top left corner here that you're seeing, I'm just going to use my pointer here. So the top left area here, that was a picture taken on Saturday there. So the beans vary from like late R6 to into R7, and some R8. The R6 plants, you can see here, those pods are still quite green yet. So the grower was concerned about whether, how this crop was going to mature. So they were asking whether or not they should be spraying any glyphosate or Regulon on it. Now, at this stage, it's still a little bit too early yet, because one of the problems that you run into is that even though you have beans at R7 and R8 in this field, there's still big areas that were greener. And spraying glyphosate too early may cause some issues with residue levels. And so what's really important is if you're growing a food grade soybean is to make sure you have that discussion with your buyer to make sure that what you're doing on that field is going to meet their requirements for export, because you don't want to be going in too early and cause any issues with MRLs, because that could be very costly in the end. But I think the bigger question here is, in this particular field, there was no real weed issues to deal with. So the bigger thing I try to recommend to growers is just maybe have a little patience, wait it out a little bit. Maybe next week, as these things are drying down, if there's still some issues there in that field and you want to get in there harvesting, then you may want to consider something like a Regulon or a heat. But again, it's still too early for that. But, just a little bit of patience. A lot of this immaturity came basically almost from spring. Because of the dry soil conditions we saw in spring, we saw a lot of unevenness in emergence. And a lot of times, a few days is not a big deal when it comes to emergence, but in some cases, it was almost 3 weeks before some plants were starting to come up and the other plants were already up. So that did cause some delays in the end. I did come back to the field on Tuesday. You can see here on the right here that these beans had moved a little bit, but still at that stage yet where it's maybe a little too early. These beans, the sample that I took here, were at R7. You can see here it's got yellow seed in it. So something like that would be okay to spray if the entire field was at that stage. But unfortunately here, there's still a lot of green in those areas here. So we're going to move forward here again. See if we can just do from here. Yes, there we go. Okay, so that's the summary on the soybeans. For dry beans, the edible bean acres, you can see kind of a similar trend here. 2022, we saw a drop again, just based on the growing conditions that we had last spring. Some growers delayed putting beans in and decided not to put any in. And so we were down to about 115,000 acres. But again, you look at the yield, we had near perfect growing conditions for dry beans last year, and broke a record as well with a high of just over 2,300 pounds per acre. Going into 2023, it was kind of indecisive about where the acres were going to be at. And I think a lot of the industry might have thought, maybe similar to last year. So a nice surprise, I guess, we did see those acres increase to about 140,000 acres. Now, again, I did some yield projections right now, and most of the industry that you talk to are saying probably maybe it's slightly below average. So when you're looking at your 5-year average, you're looking at 1860 for a 5-year average, and 10-year average about 1776. So I put it roughly about 1700, I guess, as a best guess at this point here. Moving forward, you can see here when you look at the different classes of dry beans that we grow, here on the left here, you can see the acres of the various classes from 2022. The big one being our pinto beans at 61,000 acres. Moving into 2023, we did jump up on those pinto acres, about 81,000, almost 82,000 acres there. Navy stayed pretty consistent. White pea beans is another terminology that they use in the industry. Black beans took a bit of a jump, which is a bit of a surprise to myself. I didn't expect black beans to be up this year. Kidneys and crayons are very similar to last year, and the other dry edibles are up a little bit. Those include things like the pink beans and Great Northerns in that class. So what's harvest conditions like this year? Seed moisture has been lower again, just because of the drier conditions here in that 12 to 13% range. But even with the drier seed moisture, the cracked seed coats have been low, typically under 10%. Good quality, but dry seed. And growers are able to manage that. And the dry bean companies are still happy with the quality that they're getting. Not a lot of splits or hairline cracks on the seed. Earth tag issues doesn't seem to be much of an issue. I haven't heard many comments about seed size, which is interesting. Usually with sometimes with drier conditions at certain times, you have smaller seed size. I haven't heard those comments yet. So that tells me that things are moving pretty good. Early yields, when growers started taking beans off, 12 to 1,500 pounds per acre was pretty common. Now we're getting into the harvest portion here where the better quality beans are coming off, the beans that had more moisture. So our ranges are anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500. And I say plus because there's been a few reports of right around that 3,000 pound per acre range. Provincially, right now, we're sitting at 72% complete. Harvest should wrap up by the end of September. The reason I say that, I think a lot of the beans that are out there now there are some issues with waiting on maturity. So that could be just the next couple of weeks would be, the percentage isn't going to move a whole lot like we have moved so far. So I would expect maybe, 80% by next week. And then by the end of the month, we should be finished everything off. We did get some frost last week in a few regions. And again, related to that uneven emergence. So we have some uneven emergence due to the rainfall. But this is what we're seeing. A lot of times it's when you get a frost on dry beans, it can be quite devastating if the crop isn't mature enough. But in these instances, what we were seeing is the frost that hit was hard, but because there was green leaf material, it actually protected the pods to some degree. So this is a slide here from last week. You can see here the frost damage, now green those leaves were. But within that canopy, you can also see some mature pods. So what I like to do when you see that is you kind of look at the pods themselves. And I always like to say, do they smell like fruit? Usually a lot of times when they freeze, they smell like, they have a very fruity smell to them. Wasn't noticing that in the field. So I did pull some plants up to look a little bit more closely. So these pods, the sample would have been from last week. So these pods were not affected. The seed color change had just started. So my best guess at that time was that we wouldn't see any significant damage to that. I did pull a plant, leave it on the truck for the week, and just to see where it was like here today. You can see here there were some immature pods here that basically shrunk up. There was just no seed in them. There are other pods though that continue to move through its maturity cycle. I'm just going to get rid of this pointer option here. And so then what I did is oops, go back too fast here. So here's the before and here's the after. So you can see here these pods, when you open up the seeds or open up the pods to look at the seeds, they have started to go to their natural color. So I think in this particular instance, I think the grower should be okay. Sometimes what happens though is if you get a hard frost, and in this case, if you didn't have any leaves, those seeds would start to turn grayish and with those immature pods. But I think for the most part, we're looking okay. So I guess final thoughts on both the soybeans and dry beans is that we're probably going to be maybe slightly below average on both crops. There are going to be some lows in areas that didn't get any significant rainfall, but the key word this year is variability. It all depends on when you got that rain, if you got that rain, and but generally harvest is moving along at a pretty good pace right now. And I've noticed here the forecast has changed a little bit now, and they're not forecasting quite as much rainfall as what they were initially forecasting here earlier in the week. But I guess time time will tell if that is correct or not. So with that being said, I'll open up for any questions that you may have.
Okay, yeah, the only thing that has come in so far was well, actually it's mine. I'm talking to producers and I'm thinking there's a growing interest in growing edible beans. I think it seems like guys are maybe getting more comfortable with the equipment required and doing the job. So I think we might see some more acres in the coming year.
Yeah, I think with dry bean acres, I think dry beans are a crop that take a lot more management than a soybean. It's a crop that pod height typically is lower than what a soybean would be if you're looking at direct harvesting. But one of the things you would do your exploration during the winter months. There generally are some dry bean meetings in the wintertime, usually in that February time period. Come out and talk to some of the other growers, talk to the industry people, find out which bean type would go best on your farm. But typically navies, pintos, and blacks are where most growers start. And do your research. Find out what the quality requirements are. Find out what you can do with your own existing equipment, because it doesn't always mean that first year that you have to go out and buy equipment. You can, a lot of times you can use what you have and just be selective on what you're working with. So
Perfect. Thank you, Dennis.
thank you.
Okay, one more question, and this is for Dave Kaminsky. I was talking to a couple of producers. We're talking to one guy when he was swathing his canola and lots of white dust coming off his plants and covering the swather. So I got a hold of David and asked him what might be going on. It almost looked like some type of rust showing up on the swather. So David, are you there?
I am, Lionel, yeah.
Perfect. If you want to maybe talk us through this one.
Sure. Well, this is powdery mildew, not to be confused with downy mildew. And it is a fungal disease that appears often late on the canola crop, the later seeded crops that are still greener at this time of year. And powdery mildew is favored by dew forming conditions. That is warm or hot, dry days, followed by cool nights. And under those conditions, powdery mildew forms quite easily on the leaves and the stems. Do you want to see some other pictures, Lionel?
Sure, I know we're going a little late here, but I'd like just there was something new that I don't think a lot of producers have seen.
Okay. Sharing, and which one is it? Two. I hope I've got the right screen for you there. That's still your picture. Okay, so besides that awful accumulation of spores that you'll see on the equipment, spores are a little bit sticky. You'll see white dust coming off the crop as you swath or combine. And that white dust is this material. If you look closely on the leaves and on the stems even, you'll see these little patches of mycelium. That's the vegetative stage of the fungus. You can't really distinguish the spores with the naked eye, but with a high-powered magnifier or a compound dissecting scope, this is what you'll see on the leaves. Again, the mycelium and clumps of spores. And if you look at them under the microscope, this is what you would see. The hyphae, also known as the mycelium, vegetative strands. Then they have these conidiophores, spore-producing structures with a basal cell. And off the end of that basal cell, you'll get chains of the conidia. There's one there that's detached. I'd like to mention that rainfall is actually inhibitory, or it disrupts the production of spores, and that's kind of counterintuitive. But all said and done, this is not something to be concerned about, because it appears so late in the season. It is doubtful that it has any impact on yield, and it's way too late to be applying any fungicides anyway. It doesn't appear on any labels. So with that, I think I'll leave my questions. If you want to get in touch with me to talk further about this, use my phone number rather than my Twitter handle. I'm much more often using my phone, and call or text.
Okay, and the question that came in was regarding yield and would it affect yield?
It should not affect yield. If it does, it's going to be a negligible amount. Again, because it's late in the season, there are probably other impacts on yield, such as seed not being able to mature, that sort of thing.
Perfect. Thanks for that, David.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks, Lana.
Okay, just a couple more slides before we finish up for today. I wanted to put up our harvest completion report from the crop report that was put together here just yesterday. And when you look at the province, we're 64% complete. And, you know, again, if we get a good week of harvest, we're going to see a lot of these fields being cleaned up and percentage only increasing by the end of the beginning of next week. So definitely some good harvest weather lately, and producers are knocking off some acres. Just a reminder regarding the crop residue burning program. So if you're looking at burning, in some areas have a fair bit of straw. So if you're looking at burning, make sure you're checking the website to make sure that it is a burning day, and this is the website here for the crop residue burning. Also on this is the Manitoba hay listing service. There's a fair bit of straw being baled up, I see, as well as some hay starting to be moved around. So if you've got straw or hay for sale, give either the two numbers on the screen a call there, and they can help you get it listed. If you're looking for feed, just go to that site and you'll be able to see what feed is available in the province. Our crop extension specialists, there's our contact information. So if you have any questions, you can give any one of these people a call, and they can definitely give you a hand with what you're needing. Also our livestock people, again, if you've got any questions regarding livestock issues, feed, whatever, give any one of these people a call and they can help you through that. And here's our numbers for our MASC offices, service centers in the province. Getting to that point where we're going to have to start thinking about crop harvest production reports. So start putting those numbers together as we start getting harvest down. And mine and Lori's contact information. And if you got any questions or ideas, definitely get a hold of us. And thank you for attending. It was a good session today, and we'll see you next week. This will be September the 27th. Thanks.